I think the first thing that I think about is when we say traditional gender roles, I think that has to be defined, right? Like we watch Married at First Sight together, and when we watch it, there's one person on not to date this episode or anything, but there's one person on there that talks about like the need to have their wife cooking and cleaning. So when people talk, or when men or platforms or whoever, when they talk about traditional gender roles, I guess the first question is, what does that mean? Does that mean that traditionally speaking, the man should be the one earning the money, bringing the money home, paying the bills, handling anything physical? The woman, if they want to work as like a secondary income, that's great, but I still am the primary breadwinner, and then the woman's main value add is not financial, but it's more so maternal and domestic in nature, where it's focusing on, hey, cooking, cleaning, raising our kids. Is that, if we are to assume that that is what is meant by traditional gender roles? So I guess first off, is this what you think people mean when they're saying traditional gender roles?
I think it's what they think they mean, but it's not, because at the same time, those same people also still expect that your wife is going to be bringing in something, right? Like even the episode that we're talking about for this show, the Married at First Sight show, you still expect your wife to work full time, but you still, in addition to that, want her to cook all of your meals and clean the house and do all of these other things. And I think that the big issue that brought up was the idea that you're valuing someone, you're placing a value on someone's ability to cook and clean, when you can easily hire someone to clean your house, right? You can easily hire someone to deliver your meals. You can order out, you can do all of these things. That doesn't define you as a wife and what you contribute to the relationship off of those two things. It just doesn't. And the fact that if it was really truly traditional, you would not expect her to do those things in addition to working. So it's not. I feel like it's a half-assed argument, because you want them to still be modern in the sense that they're going to actively be working and then come home and take care of the kids and then clean and cook and all of these other things while you continue to do whatever you're doing and whatever you're contributing. And it's not a fair shake. At the end of the day, I feel like that whole entire argument is questionable. I feel like everybody needs to contribute something. And I think we've talked about this, like just the idea of whatever it is that you have to contribute, that's going to be what you contribute. Like, we're better at different things, right? So I feel like we've kind of fallen into a little bit more of what they would classify as traditional because of the things that I like to do more versus the things that you prefer to do. But at the end of the day, I know that if I wanted you to do something, like if I want you to cook, you're going to cook, right? You know, I don't doubt that if I need you to jump in on something that I don't feel like doing or I'm not able to do in that moment, that you're going to pick that up, and vice versa. I would not be beside doing anything that is classified as a traditional male role. I feel like we need to get away from those. And I think that it's also really not harmful, but I think that it's never been applicable to Black people. I think that we always classify these things in tradition and this and this and that, but we have to go back and remember that we didn't have the luxury of taking on these roles for the most part in general. So they were saying like maybe middle class and up at the time back in the day would have been able to be housewives, but generally Black women have always had to work to support our families, because we've been in a status as a community, we've been in a place where we couldn't afford not to have two people working. And if two people weren't working, we were in a really bad place. So we had to make ends meet in other ways. So I think that we need to be very careful when we use language like that, because it wasn't always applicable to Black families.
Yeah. Well, the more so the question that I asked, and don't disagree with anything you said, more so the question that I'm saying is, first, for talking about defining traditional. Traditional is not to say that you, and this is just putting my thoughts or putting myself in the shoes of somebody that thinks a certain type of way. I don't think that a woman, I think what they would say is, yes, you would work, but that's not your main function. That's not your main priority. Just like, for example, if a man has to do something for the kid or a child at some point, they would do that for that person, but they wouldn't say, hey, that's not like my main function. It's not, let's say that, let's do this mathematically, right? Where it's saying we're giving weights to function. We're giving weights to roles. So a man in that sense might say, okay, my role when it comes to the weight of earning money and bringing money in and being the breadwinner, like I'll put 80% weight to that. But that person might say, I expect my wife in this traditional sense, or my partner in this traditional sense, to have a 20% weight towards that. But then when it comes to cooking, cleaning, raising the kids or whatever, a person would think in that way, that's where you give your 80%. Whereas for me, I'll give 20% there. So I think that that's what people would expect, because nobody just does one thing, but I think it's about assigning weights. I have my perspective on it, but which is not that, but would you agree that that is what they mean when they're saying traditional gender roles, when people talk about traditional gender roles?
I agree. I agree with, I can say it that I agree with that. And in terms of whether I agree with that being the definition and whether I agree with that being the outcome, and I guess just the process in which we should be moving as a community, I'm still out on that.